in our main topic here today on Mastering Dungeons, we are going to talk about creating nautical encounters. Uh-oh. Release the Kraken, apparently. So we've been talking about nautical campaigns, nautical challenges over the last couple of episodes, and this has led us to today's topic, which is specifically creating nautical encounters. And we have the original question from Pierre Borsdorf asking about how to create a nautical campaign, whether the pitfalls, what's worked. We have a new question from YouTube from Paul Savas, who says ship skill systems to manage storm survival. Would love to see what people have for this. And so we're going to incorporate all of this into today's discussion. But before we start, Teos, is there anywhere you want to start specifically or give a general thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, if folks who watch the show were saying to us, I'd love to see some more on nautical encounters. So thank you for that feedback. Here you are, and I hope you enjoy. I'll note that in episode 231, we considered monster groups and encounters, and that included a discussion of pirates, sometimes using bandits to make those kind of encounter groupings work. We talked about kind of the challenge of how 5th edition 2024 has pirates as these sort of kind of really strong, like I think Keith Amon says pirates in all bold rather than just pirates. And we also had episode 233 where we discussed building encounters, including a pirate encounter. And this all dovetails into our discussion about our campaign. And last time we kind of said if we were outlining a campaign, you proposed a first level where you end up getting a ship. So you're kind of thrust into the action. You have gotten this ship through some means. Now you've got to learn to use it and have your crew. They could have a place on the coast they call home, which is a place they work for and provides quests, and they can care about that. But also, secondarily, their ship is their home. And so the crew and the ship, crip is the crew and ship.
Yeah.
The crip is the thing you kind of care about as well, in addition to whatever that coastal area is. And we've got things like islands to explore, with both the threat of a foreign power that is racing against us to try to get things off these islands, and maybe an ancient horror that's on these islands, a curse unfulfilled or something like that. The awakening volcano, you can choose what exactly it is. But this and the idea that the islands are different provide interesting experiences that we're going to have as we go through our campaign arc. So it's worth considering that when we think about setting up encounters, right? What is the larger picture we're trying to serve?
Right. All right. And so I want to step back just a bit to talk about one thing you should, as the game master, always consider right from the session 0 where you set up your characters and set up the campaign is what are the characters' roles on the ship going to be? Because we need to know who's driving the ship. We need to know who's keeping the ship afloat. If the characters are the ones that are going to be doing these things, you need to take that into consideration as you create the encounters. Because if they are in a situation where they are pulled away from their ship maintenance, steering, rigging, sail duty, that may have a consequence. So you want to understand that right away. Is there going to be a crew that does all of that so the characters can focus entirely on dealing with any of these struggles that might be happening on the ship? If you do, or is it going to be a little bit of both? Is it there's a crew, but there's a chance that the crew will need help or need to be replaced? Then that changes the way you're going to build and imagine those encounters. So that's the first question for me that you need to answer, because it's going to change the way you present encounters.
Yeah. And I think that question to crew kind of depends, is your ship a little guy? I'm holding up this tiny little, rowboat, or is your ship like the one over my shoulder that, has 2 huge masts and multiple, levels underneath it and cabins and fore and aft. And so, that will shape also what makes sense there. At low levels, it makes sense that you might be, serving Captain whoever, and, she and her crew are stronger than you, not just even put together, but maybe individually in terms of their ability to handle foes. But
Mhm.
you are heroes. And so even at the low levels, your command of things like magic, special features, those kinds of things
Mhm.
will start to show up and prove their value. And that can be a very nice scene of sort of how you're proving your worth. Now, as you level up, probably the captains and the crew aren't growing in expertise, and that's where maybe you are the actual captain and most prized crew for special tasks.
Yep.
There's some neat systems you can look at, Shawn. Like Espergenesis, right? Has it's a space system, but it
Right.
involves this idea of being on a space ship and having crews and roles. The Ghosts of Saltmarsh book, it
Mhm.
has the idea of some roles you can take and things you can do, and you can merge those ideas really well. Ethereal Expanse setting has some cool ideas, so you can take from that to sort of shape how you want to play these roles. I like the idea of roles, and what I try to do is the vision I look at related to what you brought up, Shawn, is the idea that you don't need the hero for when you're charting a course through normal waters. But when
Mhm.
things go down, whether it's an attack, Sahwagon over the edge, or the terrible storm, or whatever, that's where your heroes being higher level, more skilled, more capable than they are
Mhm.
needed for that, right? And if you have things like the siege weapons, maybe the heroes are directing their use, and that's the role they're playing, not necessarily, lighting the fuse on a cannon.
Yeah. So let's then jump to Paul Savis's question about ship skill systems managing to survive a storm. This, I would say, is an encounter, but it's not like a combat encounter.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it is its own thing where you are trying to deal with a weather phenomenon as opposed to
Yeah.
a monster. And what you do in here really, for me, depends on the consequences that you're willing to mete out. So if the consequence of failing to navigate this storm is losing your ship, that is a campaign altering or a possibly campaign altering consequence. If the whole consequence of just miserably failing in this is that your ship takes a little bit of damage, unless that damage is going to mean something later,
Mm-hmm.
then there's no real reason to have the encounter in the first place, except to say that I ran a storm survival encounter.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that that's really a smart way to look at it. Like, what are the possible consequences here? And to keep this in your toolkit for something you can do, because you could decide, you know what? We need a ship upgrade.
Mhm.
So therefore, the question is going to be, how hurt is this ship and how much value can you get out of it when you go to trade it in, because you can't keep this
Mhm.
ship and you need to go do important things. So you're going to have to trade it in and get a new ship. Or I need you to be the goal is that you'll end up on this stranded on this island as having shipwrecked. But that could either be grabbing onto flotsam, or just barely getting your ship to run aground so that you can climb off for it and end up on the island, right? If you So you can still have meaningful choices and agency, but you can drive towards particular story angles if you so want to, right? If that's what you want to do.
Yep. And then, one question that comes from all of this for me is the value of ships, since you brought it up, Teos.
Hmm.
Right? If you look at the player's handbook, ships are very expensive, not just in terms of buying them, but in terms of selling them.
Yeah.
So if you at very low levels have characters A, own a ship, or B, are attacked by another ship that they kill the entire crew of, and now they own the second ship, don't be surprised if they try to sell it for hundreds of tens of thousands, or if not hundreds of thousands of gold pieces, which you then need to be able to get your way around, get your way through. If you are someone who allows people to just buy magic items or buy buy themselves into a powerful character. You have
Yeah,
to be
and
very wary of that.
a sailing ship is 10,000 gold, a galley is
Yep.
30,000, a warship is 25,000, a longship is 10,000, right? So yeah, multiple
Yeah.
tens. And yeah, like you said, if there are prisoner ships, what does that mean? Now, there could also be story things like if you know that the coastal town that you are serving really needs, that coastal city needs ships badly, then the players may go, yeah, so we'll bring it back and hand it over to them because we need them defending this place too.
Mhm.
And that can
Yeah.
help.
All right. So let's then jump into types of nautical encounters.
Well, actually, just can I just say
Oh,
for this,
yeah.
the specific to storm survival, one of the places you can look at is Acquisitions Incorporated has in the chapter that involves kind of jumping through portals a scene where you jump onto a ship in the middle of a storm and
Mhm.
having to deal with that. And it is what you might call a skill challenge in terms of its framing, though it doesn't have the sort of success and failures, but success and failure matters because it can drive what will happen and impact the scene. But it's an example you can look at of trying to create interesting situations, right? Are you protecting the mast, the rigging, the shifting cargo, the beast that's in the crate or cage that could get out, the monsters that attracted the storm, right? The enemy that might consider now a great time to strike, lightning being attracted to the mast, and by the way, at the bottom, someone has lashed casks of oil. The rum
Mhm.
that is about to roll overboard, which could result in the crew really, really being unhappy, right? All these conflicting things that you could possibly put into a scene at that moment that the storm kicks in, create options for the players. And that's a really fun way to do it, to say, here are all these things you could get involved in. What do you want to do? And you can get some very open play from it, or you might get very like, well, what check do I need to do to secure the rum? Fine. Both can be fun. But you can come up with those kinds of, by presenting the situations, you encourage them to come up with alternatives to it and answers to these problems. And you can make checks and so on to determine what does happen in a limited time frame, right? You've got 3 rounds or whatever it is you want to do, set it up.
Mhm.
That's a neat way to do this sort of storm survival situation.
All right. Cool. So with that, then we'll jump into the types of nautical encounters with the understanding you can combine any of these. So you could
Yeah.
have a storm with one of these, or any of
Mhm.
these we're about to discuss can be melded together to make something larger than its component parts. Uh, so, Teos, what ideas here have you come up with, jotted down?
Yeah. So, in addition to save the ship in the storm, like we just finished covering, ship versus ship ranged combat is a lot of
Mhm.
fun, whether it's siege weapons or archery, some kind of maneuvering to, attack each other. And you can do things like throw in storm or fog or whatever that makes it sort of more cat and mousey if you want that, moving through the narrows or the straits, or, there could be physical things in between the ships. And then boarding can be super fun, right? That idea of pirates swinging on the rigging. The swashbuckler is an example of a great monster that can move very easily through rigging and is super cinematic.
Mhm.
Saving your ship from various attacks, right? The big giant sea monster, that kraken, the tentacles that are coming up over the edge. And I'm holding up minis of both the kraken and these tentacles. Super fun, right? Aquatic creatures that are coming over the sides, your Sahuagin or anything else like that are climbing over to grab crew members and bring them to the depths or loot or whatever it might be. Flying predators, right? A giant rock, any swarms of flying creatures, air or water elementals, humanoids or others, especially if they can do things like those cinematic, fighting in the rigging, so on.
Yep. Docks are another place where you can have a sort of mixed nautical slash land battle. And Teos noted in our show notes here, Dungeon Magazine 114 had the adventure Mad God's Key, which had a great chase through the docks.
Yeah.
The Acquisitions Incorporated adventure again had a chase scene across several small ships uh, in a river. You have then obviously underwater encounters where you could have beasts like sharks or crabs, aberrations,
Mhm.
anything that makes its home in the depths. there you can have, to go away from the combat here, some negotiations where the crew may be upset, or you may be parlaying with a different ship and may have to fight a mutiny. You may have to cause a mutiny. You could
Yeah.
be negotiating with an enemy pirate captain or several of them, talking about who gets the treasure map, whether they're going to work together, who will get the treasure. And then you have all of the exploration that
Yeah.
can go along with a nautical campaign. Teos, what are some of those?
I mean, you can look at the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, right, which do that really well, fighting on a mill's wheel that, then dislodges itself and is going through the forest as you are running from tons of zombies, or in another scene, you could be running from tons of mermaids, or some other, harpies, anything like that works great. Fighting on rope bridges, fighting on castle walls, that sort of swashbuckling type of daring do is super fun. So creating terrain where there's a reason to do this, right? Lots of planks and catwalks. You can do classic, like the NPC you care about, or even a character, is about to be killed at the gallows, and you're wearing, hoods, and you attack. I wrote such an encounter for MCDM for fifth edition, so you can check that out. And there is also the idea of, someone's going to walk the plank, but at the last second, right, R2 gives them their lightsaber. I mean, someone throws them a cutlass. And, that idea of confronting the enemy when they least expect it can be super fun. All of these can be good. Any others you think of, Shawn?
What I'm thinking of now is not particular encounters, but what you need to be aware of when you run these encounters, which is the three-dimensionality of all of this. So not just if you're on a ship, if it has a mast, if it has a rigging, if it has a crow's nest, if it has different decks, you're already thinking in 3 dimensions. Then if you go overboard, you are thinking in another dimension below the ship. And then if you go under the water, you're thinking of another dimension below the water. So you need to, if you're going to run this nautical kind of campaign, be prepared to figure out how you're going to handle that. How will you differentiate someone who's 30 feet below the surface of the sea to someone who is 50 feet up at the top of the mast in a crow's nest? How are you going to measure that? How do you represent that if you're playing on a battle map, on a grid, on a virtual tabletop?
Yeah. And those aren't hard things, but like you said, you want to prepare for it so that when it comes up, you know how you're going to adjudicate that. And yeah, not leaving characters isolated is something I've found is very important with any kind of big elevation changes. If you have the two people, jump over the edge to swim down and attack the Kraken, now those two are down there. There must be something for the others to do. Right? So it could be the big, huge tentacles that are attacking, and now they've got fun. Or there could be the, enemy swarm of creatures, and they've got their fun too. But you want to have it, you don't want to leave like one person a crow's nest that all they can do is plink down arrows and nothing fun is happening there. And that is a really important part of that. And we always talk about this on the show, but have those fallbacks, right? If I need to, I could bring in a swarm of sharks. If I need to, I could bring in a flying creature, right? Or I could have, ways to get people across zones, right? Make me a check to swing on the rigging. You will end up down below one way or the other. Maybe it's elegantly.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got all these ideas. Now let's set up a framework for these nautical encounters. Let's pick some ideas from the list and set them up for how they're going to be fun. But again, before we do that, I want to take a step back and say that during that session 0, when you talk to the players, decide if they know they're going to be nautical characters or not. Because there's 2 ways you could handle this. You could handle this as they're already sailors, they're already familiar with the ship, they may have specific skills, abilities, backgrounds that let them do specific things. If that's going to be the case, put them right away into a situation where they can show that.
Yeah.
Now, if they're not, and it's going to be a learn as you go sort of thing, you need to set that up first. You need to have them be off a ship and then thrown onto the ship and trying to do the best that they can to survive without that specific knowledge. And there can be a great story there. But what you don't want to do is mix the two. Because what you're saying then is you who've sunk, feet or sunk time into creating this specifically nautical character are going to be working with these other characters who aren't, but they're probably going to be just as good as you at it, and it's not going to feel as special as you think it might.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I would try to do all or nothing, and then move your encounters to encompass either showing off those skills or showing off that you're in over your head, no pun intended, but you will get there.
Right. Yeah, like you could imagine if the group, stepped through a portal and suddenly show up on the deck of this ship that looks like it's headed towards these rocks. And, you've got this captain that's, looks like they're out of their wits with the fact that their ship is going to go down. And who are you, right? That whole fish out of water, so to speak, creates a very strong, compelling scene. And you absolutely know where you can go from there, right? Like maybe you're going to save the ship or maybe you have to rebuild it, but you know that you're now in the middle of this storm like we talked about before, and you've got to find a way to save yourselves and ideally the ship. And now you're also going to prove yourselves to some extent, even if you're not aces at ship stuff. And that can be important.
Yeah. All right. So let's set this up. Here's my thought. My thought is I tell the players this is going to be nautical, but I'm not going to have them make nautical themed characters. I'm going to, with their help, with their understanding, set this up as a fish out of water kind of campaign.
And are you thinking this is like our first encounter?
Absolutely. First encounter.
Let's do it.
Is you. Now I have something different in the show notes, but this just came to mind.
Yeah.
What I have is you are in a port city for some reason, looking for adventure, merchant caravan guard, right? You've all come together. You're at the docks. There are ships, and there is some horrible thing happening in the city, a zombie attack, something that means you need to flee the city, and the only way that you can safely get out is through the water. Is through the docks.
Yeah.
So you run up onto the ship, maybe fighting your way, whatever the threat is, fighting your way through, and then you're on the ship. And the captain is like, "We need to get out of here. My crew is on shore leave. I don't have what I need, but you do this, you do this, you do this.
A limited crew, yeah.
Yeah, limited crew. We need to get out of harbor. So let's go." And so that you could do a little combat, but then really lay into this sort of ship management.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think in those kinds of encounters, I love it. That's a super compelling, super fun scene. You would have to establish very clearly, almost out of character, to say to your players, the docks will be lost. This swarm of undead is something that even, seasoned heroes could not hope to stop today. And probably anybody here will die unless they can get out. And then what you could do is, so once you understand that your players got it, get out, then, because what you don't want, right, is the traditional get out of a haunted house where the house screams get out and everybody just decides to have fun and stay there and hook up. So you need folks running, and there you could do a little bit of this idea of the fighting on busy city docks, right? Where you could have what you don't want to bog them down and slow them down, but sort of quick, fast, a few zombies, that kind of thing, skeletons crawling out of the water, some of that gives you the sense of danger. And you can also sprinkle in, and I like doing this a lot with encounters, sprinkle in things that reinforce the nautical theme, the culture of this place, right? So whatever it is that people eat, there can be a merchant that's loaded down with all this food that tells you something about this region. lets you
Yep.
paint that cultural picture, but they need, saving, and maybe you grab them to safety or fight off the zombies that are coming at them so that they can set off, right? And that can also reinforce their running away, as you should as well. So they take off in their ship loaded with food. And that might involve some fun, ideas, like one of the players says, my character wants to grab, a cask of the super spiced rum that they have. Okay, you
Yeah.
grab a small keg of Captain Morgan's finest as you
Yeah.
as the guy pushes off, right? That kind of thing. What else?
Well, then it is now you've got the hook for the entire campaign.
Mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm.
what happened here
Yeah.
and how can we fix it? And that's
Mm-hmm.
where we start going island exploring.
Yeah.
We start getting clues. Maybe the clue was given in the original combat of
Mm-hmm.
one of the undead was wearing a uniform of this other nation, this island
Yeah.
nation. All right, now we are going to go out and we are going to explore to find out how bad this actually is. Has it hit other cities? If
Yeah.
we're in an archipelago, are
Mm.
other islands also in this situation? And you can get the exploration part of the campaign. You've had the
Mm-hmm.
combat
Mm-hmm.
with a little nautical. You've had the let's get a hang of running a ship. All
Yeah.
right, now let's explore and go from there.
And I like it because we could go in a lot of directions plot arc wise with this, right? We could say that this first city is one that will fall completely. And where we next go to set port and resupply and get some additional crew could be then the one we call home. Or it could be that they fight off the undead. The docks were lost for some time. They eventually fight off the undead, and we can come back and have ties to through our captain. And maybe we just go off towards the islands immediately. That clue about the outfits could point to a couple of different things. It could be that this foreign nation meddled with powers beyond, or maybe it's ancient versions of the people from that nation. And that
Yep.
nation could be involved either because they're also being attacked, or they have caused this attack and they're trying to control the thing, but they need that, artifact to truly control it, and we must stop them, right? You can think through some possible ways that could go. That'd be a lot of fun for the impetus and that whole race we talked about, where you're racing against this foreign nation to get there. And there are these undead, cursed individuals mainly fighting you, but perhaps at times also your enemy, which could be interesting.
Yep. And so another reason I like this sort of a lack of a crew is it gives the characters in that sweet spot of levels 1 to 4 this challenge that can't just be handled with a snap of your fingers and a casting of a spell.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
you can get your storm hits with the characters needing to take care of it. You can get your zombie, not zombie, Kraken, but
Mm-hmm.
a later version, right? Those sorts of things handled then.
Okay.
So for those first few sessions, it's going to be about the ship and surviving these low level but still challenging nautical themes. Then at about 4th level, I have them getting to a port, getting to somewhere where you can take on real crew.
Nice.
Now, maybe the characters own the ship by now. Maybe they're still working for the original captain. Who knows?
Yeah.
But now you can step away from that. You've had that fun in that part of your campaign. Now you can focus on 5th level to 9th level or 10th level, a different way to do a nautical campaign. Maybe it is more exploration. Maybe it is a little bit of the underwater portion of the thing where it's still a challenge to go underwater. It's not like water breathing is flying fast and furious. Although at 5th level you can cast water breathing, but not necessarily just live underwater like it's normal land. Get that part of the campaign in.
Yeah, and you could even lean into more ships if that's what everybody's loving, right? You could borrow from Ethereal Expanse or Pyre Borg or whatever to decide with Star Trek, Espergendis, just pick some sort of ship combat type rules and really lean into it. That could be fun for people. 2 encounters that I would have on my list of like, I really want, or 2 scenes. One is when you talked about getting crew. I really love with ships or organizations the where the players and their characters get to hire people and you
Yep.
present to them options, right? Here's, Cookie the cook versus,
Mhm.
Tara the cook who has a real mean streak, and Cookie's the like really overweight, everything's delicious. I've sampled it. You should sample it. Here, take this thing I just
Mhm.
took a bite of and eat it. And the other one's like really unkind and kind of maybe almost like witchcraft in the cook in when cooking. Which of
Yeah.
those two do you want to hire, right? Those kinds of NPCs and scenes can be so much fun, and I
Mhm.
never can pick which they will go with,
Yeah.
but providing those options as they, and then they really remember their crew, right? Now they care about
True.
whether it's Cookie or Tara, and then same thing for, whoever the bosun is and whoever the, whatever you
Mhm.
want. It's really, it can be a lot of fun. So that's one scene that I would absolutely want to do if we're going to replenish crew. The other thing I
Sure.
love, it's just so nautical, is where you have to get a map,
Mhm.
and the map need not be paper. It can be, a clay tablet. It can be metal,
Right.
whatever. And going into a sunken ship to get that.
Mhm.
It is great in James Bond movies and spy
Yep.
movies. It's great in Indiana Jones. It's great in pirate movies. It's just so much fun because the dangers are so different, and that sense of swimming underneath, even if you have water breathing, whatever, there's just a sense to that claustrophobia, that danger.
Mhm.
Something will be down there, right?
Yep.
What has my DM cooked up? And that is just payoff every time, right? To just go down to that chamber and, you see the skeleton of the pirate there, and then the chest or whatever it is that, those scenes are great. And
Yep.
of course, some terrible thing's going to come out at you, and you're going
Mhm.
to have to fight it off. And that's just too much fun.
Yep. And if you're a DM, and this is mean, but you don't do it every time, the dispel magic on the freedom of movement, water breathing uh, character, right? Oh, you think you've got this under control, dispel magic. Oh, now you have to hold your breath. Again, go with the rules
So what you do is
and
you're
don't do
ready to
it.
cast it again.
Yes.
Actually, you know what I
Yeah.
saw in the comments? This is slight diversion. Apologies to everybody. There was a comment that said the following on the Lorecast show. What if you're ready to begin casting when a following thing happens?
If you're ready to
So I'm not
begin
casting.
casting.
I'm ready to begin casting this spell when, the goblin enters the room. Technically,
I mean,
casting takes no time at all, right? Per the rules, it's just like you can go from initiative 20 to 19 and cast, right? So if casting doesn't actually take segments, and you just ready to begin casting.
well, I mean, we have the rule though, right? The rule literally says,
You can specify an action. I'm not doing it
uh,
now. I'm going to do it later.
right. Sure, you can.
Anyway, back
Anyway,
to our show, already in
yeah,
progress.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That just dispelling those
Yeah,
things that the
water
players
breathing. Yeah,
rely on. After they've done
yeah,
it 3 times,
yeah,
just do it once, just to mess with
yeah.
them a bit.
And give them an out of some sort, right? A
Oh,
way that they can
yeah,
break out and whatever. Some option, but it is pretty fun. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so we've got that underwater go through the shipwreck.
yeah.
Um,
What else is kind of
I
iconic
always
encounter?
love the there's this underwater society, so you
Mm-hmm.
need to go. It's going to town, except it's with the merfolk,
Yeah,
and you need to barter with them to get
mm-hmm.
something that you need,
Cool.
uh,
Yeah,
just to show that there are societies down here. Um,
yeah. And who
yeah,
may help you in some big battle later, right? That'd be super awesome, right?
exactly.
And maybe give you
Yeah,
something like you could have a battle where you're riding, I don't know, one of those underwater species. You're riding sharks or you're riding whatever,
yeah.
to sea lions, right? Those kinds of things. And yeah,
Mhm. Yep.
seahorse.
So we've got, for me, that's 1 to 4 is learn the ship,
Mm,
deal with that. 5 to 9 is have some of these nautical needs encounters. You need to have a battle. You need to go underwater and do these things. You need to
An early
explore.
enemy
Yeah.
confrontation. Yeah, the exploration.
Yep.
What would you do encounter wise for like an exploration that might be still nautically, piratey, whatever it is? So it's not just
Um,
jungle pack, but it's themed.
there's nothing that says you can't have like an in a cavern lake, right?
Mm.
So you could have to sail your ship. I would even go like your ship has a smaller boat.
Mm-hmm.
That here's a cave. It's a water cave. Oh, we need to get on the rowboat to go into this cave, and it's underground, but we're on a boat instead of a. And then you can have rapids, right? You could do lots of fun things. At the end of this is a waterfall that you're plunging toward.
Yes.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's still water danger, but it's a different kind of
Yeah,
water. But yeah, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. I love it. Yeah, and then I think anything that's swashbuckling, like we talked about before, to me that always carries into that theme as well. And so that whole rope bridge or whatever makes it super fun. You can have a lot of neat things, and yeah, the idea of water, you can see that in Pirates of the Caribbean, right, where there's a surprising amount of water in all the scenes, right? The caves drip, there are lakes and pools, and that keeps that swamps, so it still feels like that. It's that water and earth always in conflict kind of thing.
yeah.
Mm.
And then at the end, I would love to shut this campaign down by about level 12 or 13,
Mm-hmm.
with the understanding we can always come back and have a really high level adventure. But then I want to go back to that first city, right?
Mm.
That city that has been overrun by the undead dread pirate king, who has made this city its seat, and it has its throne down by the docks.
Ooh.
And we're sailing our ship right back in there. But now we're 12th to 13th level. We're throwing fireballs and flame strikes, and we are pulling the ship into the docks, and we are coming right at you.
And you've got something like the dead captain's heart, which is now a holy artifact that if you can plunge
Yep.
it into their chest, will return them to life or destroy them or whatever. And so that kind of fun, and
Yep.
so that player is going to have that moment where my character
Right.
throws the heart into their rib cage,
Yep.
now that we've got them
Yep.
to X hit points. And yeah.
And the friends you've made along the way, the merfolk, are coming up out of the water
Yeah.
to help you, and the two other ships that you have found and got crews for
Yes.
are right there with you, barraging the land with cannonballs as you are the strike force that needs to get into the heart of the dock area to strike the final blow.
I love it. I love it.
All right,
There we are.
let's write it. That's
Let's
right.
do it.
I'll be done by in an hour or so. Here we go.
I will need 2 years. So
Yeah. All right. Any thoughts about our nautical encounter framing here?
I'm so glad I'm playing Pirate Board right now, because otherwise I would be begging somebody to run this very campaign. So
There you go.
thank goodness.
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that. I hope you got some tips, maybe some ideas for your own nautical campaigns, or at least small parts of a campaign that you could set on the open seas. Thank you to the listeners out there who have opened your proverbial ear holes to us. And some people even pay for that privilege, including our Master of Dungeon supporters on our Patreon, our Master of Realm supporters who get a shout out in our show notes, and our Masters of the Multiverse who get their names mangled in real time, starting with Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshops, Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Dave Bastianson, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Calvin Bridges of Alos, Robo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimbleco, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at Neuronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, William Harshman of Runeforge Tabletop Gaming, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Shawn Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG podcast. Welcome and thank you. Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JR of the Twilight Perspective, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, John Mickey, Mighty Zeus, Shawn Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deca Player Safety, JT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, where I will be attending in January, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacles Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prunner from Croatia, Pugnus, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Samosa, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunor Games, Josh and Liwanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talos the Stormlord. That's who should be the big bad guy in this campaign.
Yes.
Talos the Stormlord. Jeremy Talaman from the D&D and TV podcast, Tres, Joe Tyler, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Wozniak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Zach Types, and Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you so much. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/masteringdnd. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to the podcast. Give us those stars so people can find us. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mastering Dungeons, if you want to see these lovely, lovely faces. So, Teos, speaking of lovely faces, where can people find your lovely face elsewhere?
Find me at alphastream.org. I did a video on my favorite technique for running initiative of using initiative tents. My next one's going to be on DM screens by the popular request of several folks. And where do we find you, Shawn?
I am on all the socials at Shawn Merwin. You can also follow the podcast on the socials at Mastering DND. And of course, you can go to our YouTube channel. Again, that's youtube.com/@masteringdungeons. So we've braved the waters. We've found our ship. We've completed our missions, and we've gone back to free the city. What are we going to do now?
Create like a fictitious faction and just give them some colorful name like the Lorecasters, and then just utterly destroy them.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go interview Cookie because I'm a little hungry.
It's delicious, really. So can't go wrong.
Yeah.